Hello folks, coming up next is something interesting. Autopsy doctors of Reddit, what was the biggest revelation you had to a person's death after you carried out the procedure? Assisted with a post-mortem when I was a student. Female patient died in her 40s. Her medical history had extensive complaints of abdominal pains, one doctor even referred to her as a hypochondriac and others commented on apparent anxiety. Opened her abdomen and she had extensive scar tissue. She was absolutely massacred inside from endometriosis. She suffered for decades and never got referred for a laparoscopy. She didn't have ducking anxiety, she had a medical condition. Because it may get too identifying. I am UK based and this was an NHS post-mortem. Patient did not have diagnosed anxiety. DRS referred to her anxiety only in relation to her abdominal pain complaints, no other known history. Thank you for sharing your stories with me and others. I will take the time to read every one. When my parents were in medical school, they attended an autopsy of a patient who had died in a car accident. Autopsy revealed that apparently this guy had survived a chest shot in Vietnam years ago that the surgeons/medics left in rather than perform risky surgery. The accident had migrated the bullet to his heart and was ruled the cause of death. Last casualty of the Vietnam War. Not mine but a doctor I used to work with. Back when he was in school, he would do his cadaver labs really late at night. To many people during the day, one time it was really late. Around 2 a.m. He was listening to his lecture on his headphones and he saw the cadaver's arm move/twitch. He thought it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Then he saw it again. Proceeded to run away in a panic. He told a few of his classmates what happened but nobody believed him. Next day they had a group cadaver lab with the same cadaver. The arm twitched yet again. The professor did some digging and it turns out the patient's pacemaker was still fully functional and occasionally fired, causing the arm twitch. He was so relieved. He thought there was a zombie in there. I may be late to the party but I finally have a good story to tell. In medical school, my group's cadaver was an 80-plus-year-old female who was extremely unfit. Morbidly obese with muscles half the size of any other cadavers. Her pectoral muscles were paper thin. To get some reference, we figured she was bedridden during her last few months, which would somewhat explain these findings. When we started our neurology unit and began to dissect the infratemporal fossa, I discovered a small metal pellet under the skin behind her right ear. My tank mates and I went on to find dozens of these metal pellets strewn around her head's anatomy, with some lodged into the cranium and others in the bones of her face. We contacted her living relatives to get some clarification and they ended up revealing that when this lady and her brother were children, they said she was 8 years old, they were playing with an old decorative rifle that the family had mounted above the fireplace. Long story short, the brother accidentally discharged the rifle into the girl's face. The aftermath was this lady was blind and wheelchair bound for the rest of her life, and the pellets weren't all removed. It was an interesting dissection with that information from then on, but a sobering moment in reminding our class that our cadavers are humans with their own struggles and rich lives. If you're considering donating your body to science, please know that we don't take the responsibility lightly and a million thanks aren't enough. I have more stories if anyone is curious. My friend once cremated a lady and when they pulled the table out there were 3 sets of forceps sitting there. Most likely she died in surgery but I always thought it was crazy those were left in and whatever metal they're made of clearly has a higher melting point than cremation temps. After my mother was cremated, my sister was curious and wanted to take a peek at her ashes inside the urn. She opened it and said, "Oh." Right on top of these fine ashes was the hardware from the broken ankle repair she had gotten years before. My friend had to do an autopsy on a baby. The dad claimed she died after rolling off a couch. My friend found that the kid was slammed against a hard surface multiple times. Dad eventually admitted he hit the baby against the wall after she wouldn't stop crying. My friend had to quit that job cause it was so taxing mentally. Dad eventually admitted he hit the baby against the wall after she wouldn't stop crying. The sad part about this is that babies sometimes just cry. There is nothing wrong with them. They are tired and just can't sleep. While in medical school, we had to observe an autopsy and could assist. One of the lectures was to observe for head trauma. You do this by hitting the skull with a hard object, scissor or the like. A hollow sound is normal but a dull sound indicates trauma. One of the other students did this exam and found a dull sound. The coroner had not yet himself examined the person and was very surprised, as he had not been informed by the police of head trauma. They then continued to examine the head and they found a gunshot wound through the skull. All of a sudden the person was a crime scene and they had to call the police again and leave the person as untouched as possible. I believe it was later confirmed that the person had shot himself, but it could have been a murder. Masters in forensic pathology here. You'd be surprised to know the number of people that have life-threatening issues that never went diagnosed and that they didn't die from. Seen an older guy who died of pneumonia in hospital. On autopsy the guy had both an enlarged heart and a couple of medium-sized aneurysms in the brain. Another guy in his 70s apparently came into the ER and had chest pain then died shortly after. Dies of a heart attack but also had cancer. In less natural circumstances though, saw a guy who had been shot in the head a couple of times. 3 definite entries and a blown out skull but police only found 1 bullet. Couldn't find the other bullet in his head at all. Assumed the police missed it. Went on as normal with the autopsy until we got to the chest cavity. The other bullet was just chilling beside his lung. Turns out it entered the skull, hit the inside, ricocheted down his neck and into the chest. That was pretty wild. I'm a veterinarian and sometimes I do necropsy, basically autopsy for animals, and one of the more notable case involved a prized Wagyu cow that died mysteriously. Wagyu cows are very expensive to rear and fetch a good price at the slaughterhouse. After cutting her open, I found metal wires extending from her stomach into her heart. It's what we call hardware disease. Apparently the cow decided that eating metal wires for constructing fences was a good idea. Normally the farmhands are quite good at keeping these hazards away from the inquisitive bovines, but I guess slip-up do happen from time to time. Why are you eating that? Dumb cow. I took forensic lectures so I saw quite a bit of crazy crap, but the things that stick is an autopsy revealing a history of abuse, pain and violence. A little more funny, a skeleton was found in the near mountains. It was very clear he died in an accident 20 plus years ago, however he had to be identified via DNA. Turned out his dad was not his dad, but his uncle. Sparked a whole public family drama show, cause the family was well known in my area. It's Arrested Development, isn't it? Not exactly an autopsy per se, but it was a patient found unresponsive, with CPR in progress by EMS. The man was clearly homeless, based on his appearance and smell. He reportedly had not been seen for several days by his friends, and was eventually found behind a fast food restaurant dumpster. We were briefly able to get a pulse back, and when the nurse cut his pants off to place a catheter we saw the cause. He had fashioned some sort of makeshift cock ring out of the neck of a plastic bottle. It was way too tight and completely cut off the circulation. The penis was fully black and necrotic. I did a bedside ultrasound and found his abdomen full of free fluid, which is bad. Most likely his bladder had ruptured from being unable to urinate for days. His lab suggested he was in septic shock and full-blown renal failure as well. He did not survive much longer than that. My wife is a pathologist assistant and during her schooling carried out the autopsy of a newborn that died minutes after birth. The mother was desperate for a child and had a history of multiple miscarriages at different terms. This was her first time making it full term and all prenatal checkups revealed no problems. The delivery was difficult, but successful, and baby was alive for a short time. Skip to autopsy. All signs point to baby being fully developed. Get to the abdominal cavity and the liver is lacerated and hemorrhage everywhere. During the difficult delivery the resident used too much force with the forceps to pull the baby out. The ruptured liver caused the baby to bleed out internally. Wife was enthusiastic about autopsy up to this point, now has no interest. Sheep farmer, I have to know how to do a necropsy for when something dies to know if it's something that could spread. Had a ewe fall over dead after losing a ton of weight and after treating her for everything under the sun. She would gasp for air and struggle to breathe but antibiotics, steroids and anti-inflammatory drugs didn't touch it. She finally passed away and I cut her open to see what the hell happened fully expecting to see her lungs riddled with crap. Her heart was 5 times the normal size and hard as a river stone. My guess is she'd had that issue her whole life and it didn't kill her until she was 2. My dad used to perform autopsies. His best story was that they were brought a body that has no real indication of any issues. After examining the body, the only thing of note was that there was blood coming out of the guy's rectum. They begin the autopsy and the guy's organs are completely liquefied and the body cavity is filled with lead shot. It became apparent really quickly that someone had shoved a shotgun up his donkey and pulled the trigger. This was in the 70s and I still have to wonder what this guy did to piss someone off enough to get a shotgun up his butt. This story circulates every year at my medical school. A body came in with a gunshot wound to the chest. There was no exit wound. They tried to locate the bullet during the autopsy. No success. They then did a whole scan, X-ray or CT, of the upper chest/abdomen/pelvis. No bullet. At that point someone said, "Frick it, let's scan the whole body." Lo and behold, the bullet was detected in the popliteal fossa, area behind the knee. It had embolized/traveled from the heart all the way down the arterial system to the knee, where it got stuck in one of the narrower blood vessels. What would have been your answer or question? Leave it in the comments below. Slap that like and subscribe button for more, and check out the link in the video description for even more answers. Peace out, and catch you in the next video.